Hi, friends. Today I'm going to show you how to make a bookmark using weaving. I want to make a bookmark because every spring I make one for my summer reading fun, and weaving is a great way to learn how to just relax and unplug and be mindful. And so it's a great way to ease into summer is make a bookmark, and then you can use it for your books when you're reading. I have a loom already that I have bought. This is a loom that you would be usually using in my classroom. You can see it's made out of really thin cardboard. Sometimes they can be kind of stubborn. You can totally make your own. I used to always make my own. You can use cardboard if you wanted to make your own. You just cut a rectangle strip out of it if you're going to be making a bookmark, or you can take like a cereal box, or this is a a Sunday nut cone box. So, and all you'd have to do is go ahead and fold it in half. I don't want to be tempted by those, so I'm going to fold those in. And then it's a little bit extra thick, and that's perfect for what we need. You don't want it to be super, super thick. This also works. The regular cardboard works really well, but sometimes it's hard to cut into. So you choose whatever you have. You can make looms out of all sorts of thick pieces of cardboard. I'm going to tape this shut so it doesn't come apart anymore, because it kind of wants to spring apart on me. And then you're going to cut notches out of the top and out of the bottom of it. And what notches look like is this. I'll draw it with a pencil first. You'll just make marks in here that kind of look like this. Sort of even. It kind of doesn't matter. You just don't want huge gaps. So it kind of looks like that. And you'll do the same thing to the bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then you're going to take your scissors and just make a small cut right where you put those notches, going on the top and then on the bottom. So I did it to the top, and now I'm going to do it on the bottom, and that's going to secure where your string is going to go into. Like I said, mine has already been done, and these notches are quite deep. They don't necessarily have to be that deep, so I'm going to use that. The other thing that you're going to need is yarn. You can just use one kind of yarn if you want to. I'm going to use two for this example so you can actually see how I'm weaving, but one is totally fine. Now, my notches aren't really cut when I get them from the factory. They kind of don't cut them all the way. So I just loosened up the notches on the top, and I loosened up my notches on the bottom. Even though this loom is kind of wide, I'm not going to use all of it. When I first started weaving, I realized it does take some time. And even though I like spending time doing that, sometimes I like to run around a little bit more. So then I just stop weaving, put it down, pick it up later. But I don't need to have a really wide bookmark. So it doesn't have to be all this wide. I'm just making mine kind of narrow. For my warp strings, which kind of act like the skeleton to your weaving, when you're weaving on a loom, because there's all different kinds of weaving, but when you're weaving on a loom, the warp strings act like a skeleton. And what you're going to do is just right off of the yarn skein, what I'm going to do is wiggle my yarn into one of those notches as best as I can. So I have a little tail on one side, and on the other side it comes down. And I want to make it come straight down, and I'm going to put it into the notch on the other end. And when you pull this string, you want it to be taut, but not super, super tight. And for sure, you don't want it to be loose. Otherwise, you'll get very frustrated. So here's my tail again. And then I come all the way down like this, and I put it in here. And now what I'm going to do is on this side, I'm just going to wrap it around. So the idea that I want to do here is wrap the string all the way around. I'll put this over here for you to see. This is tricky. All the way around my loom. So I'm going around and around and going into every notch. Kind of, sometimes I have to wiggle it in and go around. Remember, not too tight. Sometimes my yarn gets stuck and I have to be careful. Around, around, and around like this. So it looks like this on one side, and it looks like this on the other. My yarn is going around and around, wrapping around this. I'm going to make only 5 on mine. I'm going to make 5 wraps around mine. You could make 6, you could make 7. 3 would be pretty narrow. You could even make more though if you wanted it to be really, really wide. And then when I want to end it, I just think, okay, I want to be done. I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to cut it like this where I get another tail. Both of my tails are about not quite the length of my finger. They're about this big. And about, this one's a little bit shorter maybe, about that big on here. And now I have warped my loom. So both sides have string wrapped around it. It doesn't matter where these tails are either. You can have both tails on one side, both tails on the other, or mine has my tails on one side and my tail on the other side. So either side works just fine. The next thing that I'm going to do now is go ahead and pull out string. In this color, I'm using a color so you can see it a little bit better. I don't want to have too much string, so I'm just going to pull out string as long as both of my arms. So using both of my arms here, and then I'm going to cut it off. And then that won't give me too much string to work with. And you can use a popsicle stick or you can use a yarn needle. I'm using a cool tool. You know what those cool tools look like from when we work with clay. And I'm going to put my yarn on the end of the cool tool like this, and then put a piece of tape over the top. So my cool tool has like a tail, a really long tail, and the tail is coming down like this, and it's nice and smooth when I go to run it through my weaving. In order to weave then, what you're going to do is go, weaving is not really making knots, it's going over and under. This is a piece of flimsy yarn. If I take this yarn off here, it's just a piece of flimsy yarn. But the act of going over and under and over and under like this is what makes our weaving strong. The warp is like the skeleton and the weft is like the muscle. Now your skeleton for this weaving is mostly going to be covered except for the ends, and you'll see that at the very end of your weaving, you're going to pull this all the way through, and you're just going to leave this other tail sticking out, so you're going to have 3 tails. When you get to the end of your weaving like this, what will happen is you ended that row on an under. So now what you're going to do, you don't want to leave it that way. You want to go over like this, and then under and over and under, and then pull it through. And once you get the hang of it, like I said, it feels great. When I pull it through, you just kind of scooch it up. I call it scooching it up all the time so those strings are touching. And now this time I ended on an over. So now what I'm going to do is go under that string. So whatever you do to the string in one row, you do the, oops, that just went on the floor. You do the opposite in the other row. Oh, and I am getting, sometimes when your string is long, some naughty things kind of happen. So I'm going to go like this. I'll scooch it up like that. And then I can see that my string is kind of getting a knot in it. And I don't want that to happen because then it gets stuck. The weft strings get stuck in my warp string. So I just pulled out that knot. Here I go again. I ended on an under. So now what I'm going to do is go over that string and under and over and under. And I'll pull it through. And this is what weaving is. Let me show you what can go wrong. So I'll keep on, first of all, I'll show you what I'm doing right. So you can see that I've woven a bit. Oh, get that little tail out of there. Pull it through. If I end on an under, this is a really common mistake. Students will sometimes want to do the exact same thing that they did in the row. And if you do that, you can catch yourself. What will happen is you'll pull it out and you'll pull out the last thing that you wove. And you don't want to pull out what you just wove. So we'll try this again. We're going to do the opposite of what's in the row in front of you. Go through like that. Oops. And pull it through. and scooch it down. As you weave, a couple of other things to keep in mind. When you pull, as you pull this all the way through, going over and under, don't pull too hard so that end of your warp string, these two warp strings are kind of pinching together. This string and this string are starting to pinch together. You don't want that. That's called wasting in. And you don't want your bookmark to have a waist. You want it to be straight up and down. So you're just going to pull this out. You want it to be tight so there's not a huge loop. I'll show you what a loop will look like is if you pull it through and then you don't really pull it all the way and you end up with loops like that. That'll make your weaving really loose and it won't work very well to have a loop like that. So you want to make sure that that yarn touches the warp like this, but then also when you're coming back like this, that it doesn't waste in, or that you don't pull those warp strings too short on there. And that's weaving.